Hi, Johnny. I'm a partner in South Grey News, which is an online news website covering the southern part of Grey County where Markdale's located.
Beautiful Grey County.
Yes. Thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Not at all. Thanks for spreading the word about our show.
Well, we've seen you on Still Standing and on Murdoch Mysteries, and I believe Still Standing is in its 8th season coming up in January,
That's it. Yeah,
and Murdoch Mysteries in its 16th year.
that's it. You got it.
And were you in Murdoch Mysteries from the very beginning?
Yeah, I was. Well, before Shaftesbury made the TV show, they actually did a couple like movies of the week based on the
Okay.
books, sort of more directly based from the books. And I think they did two with Peter Outerbridge actually in the role of William Murdoch. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
when they decided to do a television series, they would try it out as a television series. And I think Peter Outerbridge was working on another show at the time, so they decided to recast it entirely. And thank goodness for Jonny Harris because George Crabtree came open.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of both of those shows and CBC, and so I was really excited to hear that you were filming in Markdale. So I just have a few questions about the Markdale episode. So how did Markdale get chosen for an episode of Still Standing?
Markdale was, we're always looking for survival stories for
Right.
Still Standing, and I think Markdale really fit the bill because the fire at the ice cream factory is
Right.
sort of tragic and both tragic and funny in itself, an ice cream factory on fire, but also sort of rebounding from that. But then also we wanted to sort of feature the out-migration sort of from cities, especially of young people, young professionals, and people sort of moving into smaller towns, especially young professionals who can work remotely.
Right.
And I think a lot of communities are eager to have that, are eager to have some new young blood. And so Markdale sort of fit the bill on both of those fronts because there's new suburbs being developed in Markdale, or subdivisions being developed, I should say, and it's working. Young people are moving there. People who want to get out of Toronto or Hamilton, and but still want to be within a reasonable distance if they have to come into the city, but can for the most part work remotely, but also the young people are taking up new things, like farming, even if it's just on a small scale, like hobby farming.
Right.
And I spoke to a couple of young women who reopened the deli there, Susan's Deli, and two young women, I think one had been a chef and the other a hairdresser, and so
Right.
but then sort of took on some new challenges and reopened that deli, which I think meant a lot to the town. It was sort of a bit of a social hub, but then had been dormant for a couple of years and
Right.
over COVID, of course. But it's yeah, so and then of course the big thing in Markdale was the Chapman's ice cream and sort of what that company meant to the town and the company's dedication to rebuild there in Markdale. We sort of felt like there was a bit of a happy ending with how that all sort of panned out.
So I'm wondering, after a town is decided upon, I read that a producer comes to the town first and looks for people to interview. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've got like a story department team, which consists of, for any given episode, you'll have a researcher, but then a producer and a story producer who's assigned to that particular town. And the story producer will ideally, schedule permitting, COVID permitting, we'll go and take a look and scout a couple, especially during COVID. Suddenly we had to shoot everything outside, all the interviews we had to shoot outside. So we
Oh,
were
okay.
looking for, we wanted to get a bit of a scout in as far as where are some interesting scenic places that are sort of scenic, but also give you some sort of clue as to wrapping your head around the town and getting a good picture of the town
Right.
and the state of things there. So yeah, so we'll have a day then in Toronto where the story producer and myself and the director and the writers will all sit around and we'll hash through Markdale, Ontario, and we'll find out who we're going to talk to and what the angle is and what some of the history is and sort of broad strokes stuff. So then even we've got some stuff sorted out, figured out, written down even before we show up in town.
Oh, okay. What happens on the first day when you first arrive in Markdale? Like, do you show up with the entire writing team? Do they all travel with you?
Yeah, so on our crew, I guess there's really four of us, including myself, people who are writers, but that doesn't include the story producer.
Like when you first get to town, what do you do? Do you start interviewing people right away?
Sometimes because our crew has a lot of gear that we need to keep in the hotel overnight. Sometimes we'll have to stay in the sort of the nearest larger town. In
Oh, okay.
Markdale, that was Owen Sound. We stayed
Oh,
in.
I see.
So we get there and we sort of have a meeting that evening that sort of goes through the itinerary of the week. We spend 5 days in each town shooting. And just to give the crew the sort of the angle of the story that we're trying to tell, and just like a lot of logistics, like here's
Right.
where the cameras are going to get kept, here's who's going to travel with who, and where we're going to shoot what and how we're going to do it, and yeah, like just a logistics, a production meeting.
Right.
And then the next morning we head into town and start shooting segments and interviews.
How long does it take to write the stand-up portion of the show when you're in front of the audience?
Yeah, well, it's no small feat. Like I'll usually do about a 40-minute set
Oh, okay.
in each community of original material. And so like I say, the writers and I get together and do some writing before we go on the road. And then while we're there, it's sort of shoot all day, write all night sort of thing,
Oh, yeah.
then hone the stand-up set. And then on day 5, or on evening 5, I should say, it's all got to be, and we shoot the dress rehearsal, so it's all got to be sort of locked by about 3 p.m. on day 5, because we shoot the dress rehearsal around 4:30, and then the live show is usually 7:30.
And it's pretty slick. I mean, you talk about certain people and you focus on them in the audience. Like, is that difficult to do, with the cameras?
Not really. I mean, we set aside seats in the front row for people that we've interviewed.
Okay.
So we can get some, reaction shots of them during their section.
And you sort of answered my question that like you probably could stay up all night writing jokes, because I'm sure it isn't easy to do sometimes.
Well, it's fun, and it's both, yeah, like anything. It's, sometimes when it's going well, it's super fun. When you're struggling with something, you can pull your hair out. But
Right.
but it also, it helps when the subject material is good. And I feel like Markdale, that was the case. Aside from Chapman's ice cream, we went over to Hope Haven, the Therapeutic Riding Center. That's quite an inspiring place over there.
Yeah.
And sometimes the comedy gods will drop something in your lap. Like I interviewed Barb Shepherd there, but one of the horses kept like kicking the he was in a stall and he kept kicking it until she'd go and give him a new batch of hay.
Oh,
And
yes.
he was like interrupting the interview, and I think he could sense that like we needed quiet, and that he was going to get his own way. He was going to be placated one way or the other. So, and I made a joke about that in the live show, which I think made it into the cut. So
Right,
sometimes something like that will drop in your lap, which is fun.
right. And I'm curious if you got to try Chapman's chocolate ice cream that they just won an award for the best chocolate ice cream in the world.
Yeah, I did. It's I mean, it's delicious. I mean, ice cream. How can you go wrong? But I think, but the chocolate, yeah, would be my favorite. Although I think I'm pretty sure because I had a chat with Ashley Chapman there, and I think vanilla is the biggest seller, if I remember correctly. But we did a little walking tour of the plant,
Mhm.
and it's quite an impressive facility. And he said, one of the reasons they wanted to rebuild in Markdale was because the workforce, the first thing when the place burned down, it was like still smoking when he and his family decided that they weren't going to throw in the towel, that they were going to do a rebuild and make a go of it, and that they were going to do it in Markdale. And so one of the first things they did was got in touch with employees saying, listen, don't move elsewhere looking for work. We're going to keep you on the roster and pay you, and we're going to be back up and running before you know it.
Mhm.
And part of that was because the workforce they had there, they know the process. You know what I mean? They all know how the factory works. They know their jobs inside out. And that's a benefit it's mutually beneficial between the
Right,
company and the town because, everybody there sort of keeps their job, but also Chapman's gets to keep their expertise at their job. Do you know what I mean?
right. That's right.
Like even they said something about when the office burned down, the recipes. So there was recipes that weren't recorded anywhere else, but on computer files in the office, and it all got burned down. And they're like, but it was the locals who worked there, and they were like, oh, we haven't looked at those recipes in years. We already know what the formulas and the ratios are, and they
Right.
knew. So it was, yeah, I think it was sort of a win-win scenario.
And I guess my last question for you is when you get the shows on the air and people have watched them, do you ever get any feedback from the towns that you visited and that have been on air and featured on the show?
Yeah, we do. Which is always lovely. Sometimes people will write in, or people will even send, snail mail a card to the office or something with a word of thanks, or and we get a lot of social media messages with people who are stringing, road trips since COVID, since people, are less likely to maybe get on a plane. The idea of a staycation or doing a road trip in your area is very popular across Canada right now. And so we've had a lot of people who say, yeah, we're going to string together a road trip and we're going to hit these 3 towns or these 4 towns that have been featured on Still Standing.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's pretty cool too. I've run into a few people, like young students, who say, every, Friday afternoon for Canadian geography class, they'll watch an episode of Still Standing instead of textbook work. So that's kind of nice to hear too.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thanks, Barbara.
I'm really looking forward to seeing the episode on TV and hearing what people have to say about it. Okay. Wow. Thank you again.
Okay, well, thanks for the chat, Barbara, and we'll do it again soon, hopefully.